You know, I've been feeling a little bit more upbeat this year than last year about the state of the world. I'm not sure why at the end of this Congress, but you brought me down a bit. At the same time, I felt exhilarated by the freedom, the subversiveness of everything you do. As we all know, I salute you, Patrick. Being a cartoonist, as we all know from Charlie Hebdo and what happened there, being a cartoonist is no joke. So let me try to sum up in a few words a few impressions that I had from the conference. A friend once made an observation to me in this city, in Athens, that stuck in my mind. You know, he said, it's the deviation from strict symmetry that imbues the Parthenon with the pulse of life, the deviation from strict symmetry. The human pulse is not a metronome. We're not, as Philip Fernbach put it here in his fantastic talk, storage devices. No, the human timber is crooked, and as Kant observed, out of it no straight thing was ever made. The Greeks understood that. The Parthenon deviates. The folds and pleats of Athenian statuary are supple, and that's why they're alive. I found Fernbach's remarks enlightening as well as troubling. Push, the water goes down. That's about our operating level. And if we recognize that we do not fully understand our surroundings or our actions, if we accept that we often act really from unexamined urges, perhaps the herd instinct becomes easier to understand. Even a quick glance at the 20th century, let alone at what's happening in Burma at this very moment, shows where that can end. Now, storage devices are perfectible. Humanity, on the whole, is not. So the question then becomes, what political framework is best suited to the human spirit? What system of government on the face of the earth, in the real world, has the flexibility to accommodate the infatuations, impetuosity, and imperfections of humankind? And I was very moved last night by Felipe Gonzalez. I don't know how many of you heard him talk, but to hear a man who lived for 35 years under the Franco dictatorship talking about how within democracy, the most important thing is this space that we have to disagree with each other and the institutions that we have to filter those disagreements and hopefully lead us towards the kinds of agreements that allow us to move forward. And Gonzalez was absolutely passionate about that. And I also listened with interest here to Michael Ignatieff, who, as president of the Central European University in Budapest, has been wrestling with the nationalist forces reignited in Central Europe. He was troubled, but I took away a sense that he believes this too will pass. The European Union is a formidable peace magnet, perhaps the greatest gift of the second half of the 20th century to the 21st. And Ignatieff, of course, is the author of a wonderful biography of Isaiah Berlin, who wrote in his book, The Crooked Timber of Humanity, a liberal sermon which recommends machinery designed to prevent people from doing each other too much harm, giving each human group sufficient room to realize its own idiosyncratic, unique, particular ends without too much interference with the ends of others, is not a passionate battle cry to inspire men to sacrifice and martyrdom and heroic feats. Still, he wrote, that preventive machinery was essential because no perfect solution is, not merely in practice, but in principle, possible in human affairs, and any determined attempt to produce it is likely to lead to suffering, disillusionment, and failure. Well, I don't really know of a better case for democracy, rooted in a prudent, pessimism about human nature, but inspired by an optimistic belief in the fruits of idiosyncratic human questing in conditions of freedom. So, ladies and gentlemen, never forget the power of asymmetry, and never abandon the fight for we the people. Now, a year ago in Athens, I said this: a substantial number of people in our liberal democracies feel they're being tossed hither and thither by forces beyond their control, nowhere more so than in Greece, where national elections in recent years, and there have been a lot of them, have revealed an almost complete disconnect between the vote itself and any tangible effect. What then is democracy? A mere game? Precariousness and anxiety have grown throughout the West. They lead, quite simply, to unhappiness. This is not silent unhappiness. In the age of social media, it's cacophonous unhappiness. It's also tribal unhappiness, to each his or her preferred rant. And I continued a year ago, there's a real possibility that Donald Trump could win on November 8. He's a man for whom the words liberal democracy mean about as much as checks and balances. The only power he recognizes is his own. Still, I don't believe he's a threat to the Republic, because the institutions of American democracy are less fragile than Trump's ego. Well, now that unfortunately that semi-prophecy came true, and we have President Trump, I think I'd stand by those words. And if anything, as I was suggesting earlier, I think the combined effect of Brexit and his election have been to awaken those who were kind of sleepwalking through the first decades of this century to the precariousness of our democratic freedoms and the institutions, including NATO and the European Union, that protect them. L'Europe has rediscovered something of its idealism, and it was a winning card, as I said, for Emmanuel Macron. That much-mocked blue and gold European flag can make a heart or two beat faster. Brexit has proved to be a byword for mayhem, and in the United States, the surge in subscriptions to the New York Times reflects, I think, a broad awakening to just how critical it is to bear witness, hold power to account, safeguard the First Amendment. And among the millennial generation, there's a growing realization that news, like freedom, is not free. So no, Mr. Bannon, we're not going to shut up. And no, Mr. Trump, we will not confound fact and falsehood. Kofi Annan quoted Jefferson here at the conference: the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. The founders, inventors of those checks and balances, had no illusions. A republic, if you can keep it, Benjamin Franklin responded in Philadelphia in 1787 when asked what form of government the nascent United States had adopted. Well, in Europe and America, I think the business of keeping it has now been entered upon in earnest. We need to be vigilant. We'll see in the end what Trumpism amounts to. It might in the end be as ineffectual as it is mesmerizing. But nonetheless, this is a moment when, as I suggested earlier, he's trying to blur the line between truth and falsehood. What does an autocratic leader want? An autocratic leader wants a disoriented population. How do you get a disoriented population? By leading people down the rabbit hole where they no longer know what that distinction is. And the only truth they think they can identify is the one that is issuing from the voice. And of course, President Trump has called himself the voice. So we need to be careful. In conclusion, the phrase I'd like to take away from our event is from Professor Fernbach again. And that phrase is intellectual humility. We need it. We need a lot of it. There's been a lot of liberal arrogance. You know, nobody was ever persuaded of anything by being made to feel stupid. Now, journalism has changed a lot since I filed about the Lebanese civil war by telex from the Commodore Hotel in Beirut almost 35 years ago. That hotel, by the way, was once described as a functioning telex machine surrounded by 500 broken toilets. But the essence has not changed, the essence of journalism, in my view. It's boots on the ground, it's listening with all your senses attuned, it's bearing witness, it's holding power to account. So I've tried to get out into Trump country over the past year, before the election and after it, and it was going out there that led me to that conclusion that Trump would probably win. And when you're out there, you hear things like this. People have to choose between heating their homes, buying food, or buying health care. And you want them to worry about the survival of the planet or transgender stuff? I respect business and I distrust government. That's the American way. I don't want illegal immigrants taking our jobs. I don't like liberals who shop at Whole Foods talking down their noses at me because I shop at Walmart. White lives matter too, you know. That woman forgot that, and she lost, and good riddance to her. We lost our discipline and our moral code in this country, so we need Donald Trump to shake things up. Well, you know, it's important to hear people out. That's democracy, listening to what people say. There are hateful racists among Trump supporters, no question about it. There are also many decent, thoughtful, anxious, patriotic Americans who felt, for one reason or another, that they were losing some part of their country's essence. And the liberal complacency that holds that these people simply need to be educated is self-defeating. If that's what the Democratic Party exudes, coastal complacency, it will lose again, just like Hillary Clinton did last year. That's another Cohen prediction. We'll see what happens. But please, let's be humble. Let's try to listen to each other. It's what democracy is about. And let's preserve the multifaceted weave of our republics. A last word. I mentioned idiosyncratic human questing and the democratic institutions that accommodate it. This event, this forum, this coming together is above all the result of one such quest, one such passion, that of a man from faraway Australia, for whom the glittering beauty of Sydney could not efface the Greek in him. We all need to belong. It's a fundamental human need, like love. Achilles Celtus, my colleague and friend, found the strongest expression of that belonging here in Athens. And so he labored to create, a few years back, the little miracle of this gathering. I don't see Achilles here. Perhaps he is. Oh, there he is, yeah. Achilles, I salute you. Democracy is where I pitch my tent. It's too late for me to change. And if there are people of the convictions and energy of Achilles beside me, I know the tent, however buffeted by the forces of the modern world, is secure. So thank you, Achilles. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all for coming. Sometimes wandering around the archaeological ruins of Greece, something I love to do, visit the archaeological sites, I've wondered, does the caryatid in her stoic grace even know the burden she carries? We might ask the same question of democracy and the miracles it undergirds. Thank you very much.